please put your hands together for Mr. Raj Kotecha.
Thank you. So we have some slides. I don't normally do slides, but the reason why I've done slides, ironically, thanks mate, is because of the fact that normally as a person who runs workshops and things of that nature, I can speak for 4 to 8 hours. And today I'm doing a straight down the line 20 to 25 minutes. So I said, okay, if I give myself a bunch of slides and I force myself to click through them, then I'm going to make sure I use the time properly. So as Che mentioned, I'm Raj Kotecha. We have worked together on a couple of projects before. I pulled Che in to some of our workshops and he's done a great job there. And essentially what I do now is I run an agency called the Creative Content Agency. The way I ended up running an agency, I started the business back in 2008, but 10 years prior to that, I went to university with no idea of how I was going to pay for it. And because I've been a shopkeeper's son my whole life, sweeping floors and putting Coke cans on the shelves, one thing that was always playing in my parents' house, so in the house and in the shop, was music. I was just constantly listening to Madonna, Duran Duran, Bon Jovi, Run DMC, and just learn all these lyrics and beats inside out. So by the time I got to 18 years old and I went to university, I was like, if I'm going to pay for this, I need to start playing records and start DJing. So this is my 20-year anniversary this month as a DJ. And yeah, I know, it's kept me young, I hope at least. So, so as a result of that, 1998, went to university and started DJing, met a whole bunch of people. From working in my dad's shop, I was always kind of like selling hand to hand, you know, different customers every minute. This person wants milk, this person wants wine, this person wants a birthday card, this person wants bread. At university, it was the same, but maybe a little bit more daunting. So I'd have to walk up to 24 women that are a mile out of my league looks-wise and say, hey, would you like to come to this party on Sunday? And each ticket I would sell, I would make 2.5 dirhams, like 50 pence. Luckily, I lived in a building with 1,000 people, 1,000 students, so we basically went all the way to the top floor and knocked on every door and came down the fire escapes until we sold all of our tickets. Manchester in the 90s was a scary time, a lot of drugs, a lot of gangs, a lot of crazy stuff. And so it was a bit daunting to start doing our own parties, but one DJ, this incredible talent that we took on, forced me to start doing my own parties. So off the back of that, I was both studying technology, and back in 2000, 2001, I wrote a thesis called M-Commerce, How to Get into the Minds and Pockets of Consumers. This was 8 years before the iPhone and about 5 or 6 years before 3G technology, and certainly way before 4G, which is what we have in our pockets right now. Hits April 2000, NASDAQ crashes, technology industry is gone, first dot-com bubble bursts, and there is basically no job for little Raj. So off I went to Canada, gave everything up that I was doing in the UK, started the first, I'm gonna give you the short version of the story because we've got 20 minutes today, but started the first independent ringtones portal, so working with celebrities like Cardinal Official and Russell Peters and trying to get those original ringtones. Ringtones. Yeah, so if you're over 35, you definitely remember that 10 years ago, putting a custom ringtone on your phone was like, it was the coolest thing. And custom cases as well, yeah. That was like how you had swag back in the day. So I worked on that, and that was cool. And off the back of that, I did a whole bunch of TV and press and radio. That's when I was like kind of like hood, street kid, street promoter was scrubbed out of me, and I was like polished up to go on TV. Came back to the UK, still pre-iPhone, working with companies like Warner Home Video and Paramount to help them figure out how to get trailers onto Sony Ericssons and Nokias. Very difficult at the time because there wasn't a uniform smartphone that everybody was using. Along comes the iPhone. As we approached the iPhone era, like the 2008, 2009, I was working for a company in Los Angeles, which was essentially the Financial Times of social media, whereas everybody else was covering what MySpace was doing, or Bebo, or Friendster, or Facebook, in terms of new features and apps that they had inside there, like video, pictures, news feeds. The company I was working for was doing the financial information, so like intellectual property, earnings, mergers, acquisitions, things of that nature. That was an interesting company for The Guardian, the big media company. They bought us in 2008. I was employee number 6. I had no idea that I had share options. When the call came in, I was in a small, I was living in a divided living room with a bed inside in London. I just made my way to London. I'm originally from Manchester. And I got a call saying, you know, you've got share options. And I was like, what the hell are share options? And they were like, look through your employment contract. So I flicked through it, and there was this random raggedy page that was all scruffed up, and it said that I had a micro percentage of the company. Anyway, The Guardian bought the company for a lot of money. And being employee number 6, you know, I was able to pay off a couple of credit cards. I went to Australia, and yeah, luck. It's all luck. I had no idea what I was doing, and still to this day. So I got this share option kick out, went to Australia, I'm lying on the beach, I'm like, everything I've ever done, whether it's organizing parties, doing flyers, whether it's going on television, whether it's, I don't know, like even when I was working for this news agency, like I was capturing video with interviews with people like Disney and Warner and different people like that, even though it wasn't part of my job description, I just enjoyed making content because as a street guy and as a DJ, you're obviously making mixtapes and things of that nature. So because I was working for this company in LA and New York, I was going back and forth, and in the day, I'd be working in the office, but at night, I'd go out to the hood basically. So I'd go to Harlem or Crenshaw and I'd be interviewing rappers. And the more I interviewed rappers, the more people got interested in what I was doing as a DJ. And when they saw me online with their favorite artists, whether it was Pharrell or whoever, Wu-Tang Clan, they'd be like, okay, that guy knows music. So then we get more music bookings. So I'm lying on the beach, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I want to create more content, but I don't want to necessarily be the guy who creates the content by hand all the time. I'd like to work as a consultant. I know what I'm doing. Brands are now starting to reach out. I need some sort of agency that creates content, some sort of creative content agency. So I jumped up off the beach, went back to the hostel, registered the domain, went back to the UK thinking, I have figured this out. I've got everything going for me that's just going to allow me to kill. And guess what happened from 2008 to 2012? I got laughed out of every single office I went to talk to. I literally would go to a company like Deloitte, top 4, and say, you need to put your CEOs on LinkedIn. And they would laugh at me and say, why? Because Accenture and Ernst & Young will steal them if we highlight them. And I was like, no, that's absolutely not the case, because all these partners do in these organizations is go for teas, coffees, build relationships, and then drive business into the organization from the top down. They're actually the top of the sales funnel. So anyway, good thing is, news organizations like TV stations, and they started using hashtags to interact with the TV show, and the Facebook movie came out, the social network movie, and then it became mainstream. And when it became mainstream, we were perfectly aligned as an agency because we'd started working with e-commerce companies that had a ravenous appetite for content. So whether it's companies that sell packaging or golf clubs or fragrances, with e-commerce, they constantly need new videos, new images, new text, and new audio. And so for the last 10 years, that's what I've been doing, up until around this summer, where even though like we have the same agent, so even though I've been doing a lot of speaking and things like that, I realized actually the first 3 to 6 months of every client I've ever worked with, whether it's again, like an e-commerce company or a professional services company, events company or celebrity, the first 3 to 6 months of having conversations with those kind of clients is always roughly the same. And so I thought about the questions, and I thought about all the things that we covered. So this is where I'm going to start the talk today very quickly. Imagine everything to do with social media and content in one bucket. It can be quite daunting. When you start thinking about Instagram stories, IGTV, hashtags, LinkedIn video, copywriting for SEO, medium.com, Facebook video, Facebook Live. If you put that all in the bucket, that's pretty much whoever I talk to in the first day or two of talking to them as a client, that's what they struggle with. And so I came up with this method of the 4 variables that affect everything. And I thought if you'd had 4 small buckets next to the one big bucket with all this junk inside, those 4 small buckets would be plan, produce, publish, and promote. And so that's what I call the 4 Ps of content, which I've just launched in the last couple of weeks. So it's really the 4 Ps of content is how to plan, produce, publish, and promote content on social media that drives business results. And guess what? Most businesses are interested in business results rather than likes. They're really looking at bottom line. Do I press the right key to make this? It's the first time ever having one of these. I feel like I'm at TED. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about today to keep it punchy. 1, this is my kind of like 3-point philosophy, okay? 1, content sits above social media. If we just look at the social media platforms that have mattered for the last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, it's bounced around from Friendster, Bebo, MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, things of that nature. And it will continue to change because they disrupt from within. Facebook is looking to disrupt its own model by buying companies like WhatsApp on the bottom end because everyone uses it, and then start buying companies like Oculus, which is virtual reality, on the top end, and trying to disrupt everything in between. So this is a moving target. Social media is a moving target. The first thing I explain to my clients is good content's good content. Do any of you follow maybe the same content creator on YouTube as you do on Instagram? It's pretty common, right? By show of hands? And then they might also be popping on Facebook as well, right? So that's because when you think of content first, that's our philosophy. When you think of content first, it actually doesn't matter then where that content goes. If it's fundamentally good content, you'll find a home for it. And so that's why in our linear process of plan, produce, publish, and promote, in planning, we plan the content first, what it will be, how do we come up with good ideas for it? How will we distribute it? Who will be interested? What kind of responses and reactions are we looking for? Are we trying to drive, you know, actual sales, like bottom line revenue, or are we just trying to enhance the brand and, you know, do like some much more softer experiences with content? The second thing is the four Ps is a thought process that works for non-creatives. It's very common, especially for some of my clients that are in their 50s, to just bring in a young dude like me that wears a cap and Air Force Ones and says, you know what, that guy roughly looks like a millennial, although depending on who you ask, I'm really not. And says, or we'll just use like, you know, we'll just use Letitia, who works in our PR company, or I've got a nephew called Kyle, and he knows what Facebook is, so I'll get him to come in and do it. What I've revealed here, it's almost like those magicians on YouTube that explain how they do the tricks, is with this 4Ps process, you do not need to be creative to apply the 4Ps process, because we've come up with a bunch of frameworks that are so simple to understand. If you look at like Porter's 5 Forces and Ansoff's Matrix and all these really common models, we've come up with these models to make sure that anybody can lift off when it comes to creating content. And the third thing about what we do now as an agency and an academy where we teach this is we use 100% evidence-based case studies. So we'll talk about that in a second as well. So first thing, content sits above social media. Platforms are at war, sell bullets. What I mean by that is it's in YouTube's interest to be the most common place that your average internet user goes to consume video. But it's also in Facebook's interest to be the most common place that people go to consume video. So they are at war with each other. Everyone's aware when it comes to data breaches, customer records, that all these companies from Netflix to YouTube to much smaller companies, they're all in the data game and they're all trying to become the #1 at what they do. So if they are at war with each other, the way that you sell bullets is that your job is to have content that goes in all of those places. And so this is goes on to the second point, which is attention is currency, trade it. On the top part of the ecosystem, you've got all these social networks and media companies that are arguing with each other to try and get attention. And at the bottom, you've got people like us. And when we open our phones, we realize now, after so many years of having a smartphone, that actually, when a company's trying to get your attention and give you an advert, they're competing with your niece or nephew's or son's first steps. Like, if you're watching an advert from Coca-Cola featuring your favorite football player or influencer, and then all of a sudden it says Little Timmy's first steps on your WhatsApp, it doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter what Kanye or Trump said that day. You're going to click on it because Little Timmy's first steps is something that you've been looking for. So that's how valuable attention is. Right now, the Beatles' first album is competing with Little Timmy's first steps on your phone, and it's competing with a new show on Netflix, and it's competing with something outlandish that Kim Kardashian did. It's all attention. It all plays on that roughly 5.5-inch screen. And the third thing is time reveals different results. When you've worked with as many clients as I have across as many different industries, one thing you realize is that it takes time for business results to make themselves known. So I'll give you 2 examples. One very quick one. I do some ghostwriting. So we produce like images, videos, audio, and written words. And we took on a client in Abu Dhabi recently. It was a 75, 76-year-old white American male, and doesn't really know much more than switching on his laptop and logging in how to use his computer. And when you're layering on things like social media on top of that, it gets even more ridiculous for him. So we went to his office, we put a microphone in front of him, and we started asking him some questions about his life, his work, how he views young up-and-coming pilots coming in. And then we ghost wrote that up. And when we ghost wrote it, what I mean by ghost write, does everybody know what that is? Okay, sorry, forgive me. That means that I write as if I'm him. Make sense? So I get into his head, I hang out with him, I have coffee with him. And we wrote these articles, and straight away, you're talking about 100, 175 likes on LinkedIn. And because the company he joined was a new company, we said, the title we wrote there was, I'm 75 years old and I joined a startup. So when you're scrolling through LinkedIn, everyone was like, that doesn't make sense. We use this juxtaposition. A 75-year-old joined a startup. Why, what, how? So that gets you past the headline into the story. And once you got into the story, people read the story. It was heartwarming. It was relevant. It taught them something. And they all started putting in things like, great story, right through to, oh my God, you're my hero. It's incredible how you still take chances at 75 years old. Yes?
So then what are the components that will get that attention, like in the story you told? How do you get that attention to you, what you're trying to say versus all the other
So ultimately, how do you get the attention versus everything else that's out there? As you saw there, I put in a sentence that kind of juxtaposed itself. So that causes a bit of yeah, there's a conflict. There's a conflict in your mind. Is that in your mind there's a juxtaposition. It's not something you can read, skim, and then move on because it's left you unstable when you read the sentence. Yeah, and it also wasn't clickbait because the company was a new company. And when I say startup, I actually refer to startup in the traditional sense, which is a new company trying to talk to a new audience that doesn't exist. And this company he was with was literally a new company that didn't even have an established customer base. So it was a true startup. But then also what it came down to is that what were the metrics to get more and more people to engage with him? Because when they read the story, they find out more about the company that he's working with. But how does it reveal itself over a period of time? Well, that's the obvious one. That's the kind of like headline grabbing. We did some work for somebody, it got loads of attention on social media. There's all your likes, there's all your comments. But there's another example I can give you, which again was an up and coming conference company. There was a conference brand that sat within a bunch of other brands in a portfolio. So the conferences that were ran by this master umbrella company were in hotels, restaurants, and aviation. Aviation was the new one that was coming up. So they did their first event, and at their first event, we did an interview with an aviation company in Wales in the United Kingdom. And when we interviewed that aviation company, they only had 2 planes. And we put that podcast out. Now, out of all the podcasts that we were putting out in the hotel industry, the restaurant industry, and the aviation industry, the aviation conference being the smallest one was getting the least amount of plays. So jump forward a year, and I'm in Africa again. This is where the conference was. And I meet a guy from that aviation company. And I said to him, by the way, I've seen the stats on the podcast that we put out. And we're talking dozens, if not hundreds of plays. Like hundreds of plays is like cat on a skateboard on YouTube. Like that's insane in their industry, right? So I meet this guy and I'm like, okay, cool, you're with this aviation company. I said, listen, I'm only gonna go out on just take a punt here, like take a chance. Is there any chance that you heard this random little podcast that we did with the CEO of your company last year? And I expect him to go, nah, you know, a small company, they're just starting. He goes, did I hear it? He goes, that's the reason why I joined the company. Now everyone always says, oh nice, when I say that. This is the real icing on that cake, on that story. I said, you joined as a result? And he goes, yeah, not only did I join, I'd already interviewed with that company and turned them down. I refused the job. And then when I heard the podcast, I heard the CEO open up and talk about things to do with the mission, the goal, their values, that really resonated with him, that made him call the CEO back and say, you know what, actually, I heard this podcast, I heard you. You revealed yourself outside the context of a normal you interviewing me kind of situation, and I like what you're about and I'd like to join. And the following year, he went to the conference. Now, we can all guess that it was that aviation company that paid for the ticket. But again, that was one ticket that was sold as a result of a piece of content made 12 months earlier. And it wasn't direct, it was indirect. Get it? So direct upside was the aviation ghostwritten article. Indirect was this domino effect of all these things happening, already having done the interview, calling back, and that actually sold a ticket. So business results come over time. This is how our process works. In theory, when you first start working with us, and the reason why I've started an academy is basically just to explain to people the same thing that I explain to CEOs when they first come on board with us, is that things happen in this order: plan, produce, publish, promote. Plan, what you're going to do, what kind of impact are you looking for, what's your strategy, what are your KPIs, your key performance indicators. Produce, is it going to be image, is it going to be text, is it going to be video, is it going to be audio, or more realistically, what combination of them is it going to be? Because putting a video online, let's say on YouTube, with the right descriptions and the right tags makes that video even more efficient. And guess who YouTube's father is? Anybody know who owns YouTube? Google. And so the most search engine in the world is Google. Second is YouTube. So optimizing for those 2 platforms gets you SEO, search engine optimization. So that's on the produce side. Then publish, where does it go? What platform does it go on? Is your audience on Snapchat or is it on Instagram? And if it is, what are the norms of those platforms? How does a hashtag work differently on LinkedIn versus how it works on Instagram or even Instagram stories? On LinkedIn, you can't tag a location. On Instagram, you can. What are the benefits of that? And then promote it. So do you work with influencers, because that's a pretty sexy topic at the moment, or do you do what's really getting a tremendous amount of results for my clients, is put the content in your email, increase your email open rates, and that's where a lot more powerful, influential meaningful traffic comes from email. Think about it. You'll scroll through like this all day long on Instagram, but when you open an email, you open it by choice, right? You don't have to open an Instagram to view it. It doesn't trade you a subject line first. Whereas with email, once you've clicked on it, you've committed. So there's a different psychology when it comes to consuming that content. But in practice, this is what our model, framework, or what I prefer to call a thought process is really about, which is the integration of all these things. Because when you're planning, you're also thinking about how you're promoting. When you're promoting, it's also down to how the content was published. And of course, they're all kind of tied into each other. I couldn't find a jigsaw where in the middle they were all having a nice little kissing party, but you kind of get what I'm trying to get to, right? Okay. So, evidence-based case studies, market-leading clients. These are some of the clients I've worked with. The conferences I was telling you about are across the bottom there. And then these are some of the companies that originally said to me, we shouldn't work with you. But when the market changed, we ended up working with them. IBM Marketing Cloud became a sponsor for the event I did with Gary Vaynerchuk. Fragrance Shop was cool because not only are they selling like branded fragrances like Gucci, Armani, Ralph Lauren, so on and so forth, but you've also got to get some shine on the retailer itself. The point being is that when I'm telling you something, typically I try to refer back to some actual money that's been spent and made. But more importantly, and if I can leave you with one final thing, guys, is that when you're doing content in social media, if you find yourself doing it for your business, please take time out to do it in the evenings and weekends as well to stay on top of it. If the only time you box is when you go in the ring, you're pretty much going to get your ass kicked all the time. But if you're constantly sparring outside the ring, then that's what's more important. So these are my original ventures. So has anybody heard of Fat Man Scoop? He has records with Missy Elliott and Mariah Carey. If you go to the club and you hear that song, bass drop, you got a $100 bill, put your hands up. That's that guy. So we have a podcast on iTunes together. Then I have another one called Raj Kotecha, That's a Great Question, where I interview everyone from the CEO of Emar Hospitality right through to Tupac's brother. So like a range of different people. Love Soul was my DJing duo. And off the back of that, do you remember I told you I started making a lot of content with celebrities? So there's many, many celebrities that we made content with. But applying the 4 Ps is helping these two get seen and heard, which is helping my personal brand, which is driving revenue for the academy and the agency. Same with Love Soul. When I put out content with celebrities, it helped the music business. My friends, you're all invited on Monday, which is in 2 days. I invite 15 of Dubai's most talented people. They invite 15 of their friends. We all meet in a bar. The bar shouts everybody a drink. The vibe is kind of like a house party, so you don't need to like bring business cards if you don't want to. Anybody can talk to anybody. So that's one other brand that we've got in the events world. And then Vayner World with Gary Vaynerchuk. If anybody doesn't know Gary Vaynerchuk, he's an early stage investor in a number of companies that have done well, from Facebook to Uber, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. He now runs a 900-person digital marketing agency, and we launched 2 of his books, the Ask Gary V book and Jab, 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 Right Hook. I've interviewed him 6 times. He's like an older brother, so that's some of the stuff that we've done. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be super happy to answer them. I know my time is up, but like, thanks so much for letting me share my 2 cents on what the content world is. All right, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
How can people find you, Raj?
You can find me at Raj Kotecha, RajKotecha. Is my name on here? Oh yes, my name's on everything, but yeah. That's my name down there, that's how you spell it. So at RajKotecha. You can DM me anytime on Instagram. And my email address, if one person wants to write it down and share it, is raj@creativecontentagency.com. And like I said, we have academies, workshops, and different things that you can take part in as well. We have the first one, I think, on November the 10th. So, and Che, you can get hold of. Like, you can get hold of me anytime.
If you
Yeah.
want to work with Raj or have questions for him, just let me know. I think you do, well, one-on-one work, but you also have the courses.
Yeah, we do.
How many? Is it 4 hours or what is it here?
The next course is 8 hours.
8
So
hours.
it includes lunch. We also make a piece of content with you. And if you're interested as well, there's also like an after dinner where if you want to bring like very specific things that you don't want to share to the group, we can drill down. We do one-on-one mentoring, coaching, and you actually get you'll get the same approach from us that you would get if you were a like $16 million company, or whether you're just trying to launch a hair extension business. We don't care, because the 4 Ps, you're actually launching a hair extension business. I have a guess for every single one of you as well, but some of them are wrong, so I'm not going to say it. So whatever it is you're trying to do, we will work with you with the same approach, because, like I said, we're not chasing the money in the big clients. We're chasing people that we know will benefit from the approach of the 4 Ps. All right.
Again for Raj.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks.
Nice to
Cheers.
All right.